the fact was I didn't even believe in healing.
Well,
So that's kind of interesting though. So my mind didn't quite believe in healing, or my general attitude was I don't believe in healing. And then still I realized I have to go and do a Reiki training. And I did. And my wife is just shaking her head. It's like, yeah, he's having his midlife crisis, he's doing crazy stuff. But the thing is, I did this training, and during the training, I had, again, kind of like awakenings, because I got so, like the depression I was in the middle of, it just evaporated.
wow, okay.
And suddenly I was in a really high state. Not really the Satori or anything like that, but more just energetically. I was suddenly full of life again, and it was just quite remarkable. And then I did all these trainings that autumn. Everyone did in Europe, and there were quite a few. And then I became part of the team.
Oh, okay.
And
Supporting him, or?
Yeah, working for that school. So I was working for that school from just before Christmas 2010 till September 2015. Mystical experience. It's more like it was the oneness experience, or just, in general, just having experience of a greater reality. You still have responsibilities, right? But it's like the most of the stuff we do, like it takes so much effort. It's either we're so concerned about what everybody else thinks of us, or we have our own internal dialogue, which is usually the worst part with the inner critic and so on, but it's pushing us to achieve, to somehow counter this lack of self-worth. But then with the exercise, you actually start looking and get guided to start discovering that, oh yeah, right, that's actually how it works. So that you get the keys, right? So that you can actually, and tools, so that you can actually continue this process, in your everyday life.
Welcome to this new episode, and today I am here with Mardava. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Luca.
Very nice. So Mardava is the founder of Tantric Reality. So first of all, what is your story in life?
Okay, story in life. So, I grew up living abroad. My father worked for the Foreign Office, so I lived in several countries, which was, for me, it was a great way to grow up, actually. I got several languages for free. I got English very well. I went to British primary school. I lived in Belgium, learned some French, and so on. My big turning point in life was actually rather early. It was when I was 19. I had an episode of having what you could call like spontaneous awakenings. But they were quite dramatic, and I wasn't really prepared for them. And I was having realizations like oneness, realizing kind of seeing everything is really one. And this was quite confusing for my 19, because you have to realize this was back in the 80s, right? So I was part of that generation that kind of was a contra-revolution to the hippies, to the 70s, 60s, right? So it was very materialistic period. Ronald Reagan was president, Thatcher was prime minister.
Yes.
It was like, Schwarzenegger was on TV. It was very materialistic and very much about money and success, that generation. So I had no idea about this. I was not interested in any of religion. Obviously not. I was not brought up with religion. I was not in any way into spirituality before that. I had not read. I wasn't even into philosophy. These are subjects in school I was not very good grades. I was not interested. But then I had these realizations, and one of the things was quite beautiful, but then I also had the emptiness experience where you kind of realize that everything is, there's no one here, and there's no meaning. There is ultimately no meaning. Because there's no one here, we're just making it up. And this was very confusing.
Oh, I can imagine,
yeah. So as a 19-year-old, I actually struggled, and I realized I needed a new map of reality, because my map did not cover what I had experienced. So what I did was I started with studying Buddhism, Zen Buddhism. That was my first step into spirituality. And I did that for about a year, very intensely, and until there was a small group of Japanese living in Stockholm back then, and they were doing this kind of privately. So there were no priests or roshis in Stockholm, not when I started. And but we did have them come about a year after I had started. There were some, priests or roshi that came to visit, and we could ask questions. So I was asking like a number of questions. One of them was, how long does this take? And they're like, what do you mean? Yeah, to get to this freedom, to Buddhahood, because I needed to get like answers. Like that was what I was kind of just spontaneously, because I wanted to get back to a state.
Yeah, because you experienced it.
Yeah, already, right? So, and they just looked at me like I was like really a bit of a loony, and they're like, and they were shaking their heads saying like, well, who knows, up to 1,000 lifetimes. I'm like, 1,000 lifetimes? I need it now. I'm out of here. So I have to find something better. So this was the start. Then I was doing a number of things. I had a guru. Well, I guess you call it guru. He did kind of satsangs, big groups. International guy called Maharaji back then, Prem Rawat's his name. He was really a heart teacher. So he was sharing a lot about reality from the heart. Oh,
very beautiful.
This was very important for me because I grew up with not enough nurturing, like many of us from our parents, right? Not that my childhood was terrible, but it was not, well, psychologically I've understood later that nurturing is very core to our well-being and to be stable and, all this feeling welcome in our, welcome in our life, welcome in our body, welcome here. So the heart was very good for me. At the same time, I was also doing more normal things. I was studying. I did business degree, and I did also a master in computer science.
In Stockholm still, yeah?
This is north of Stockholm in one of our two big university cities called Uppsala. So I was also enjoying studying a lot. It was, student life is great, very free, partying and all that. So I was there for nearly 10 years actually studying, with some breaks going traveling. And and then I did of course I was also doing then some work afterwards. So I was in the IT sector for a number of years, starting with working for a company that developed software for like the financial sector. And then I was working with motivational training and sales trainings for a number of years also. And I was in startups, a number of startups there also around 2000. Especially one that I was in a longer period. And that's when I first also had the experience of getting to something you could call a burnout. Like working like 60, 70 hours a week.
Sure.
Like all this stuff when you're an entrepreneur. And it can be very burdensome. So that's when I kind of stepped out of that a bit, already back in 2002. Then I did work a bit with sales and motivational trainings after that for 5 years, but not 70 hours a week, more like a normal work hours. But what I noticed when I was working with sales and motivational trainings was that the people I was training, a lot of them just didn't improve. And so I realized that they have core beliefs of lack of worth. And it's like, you can do all the pumping up of motivational, like a bit like Anthony Robbins things, and we're doing things like that. They're great to last for a few weeks, and then people are all pumped up, and then reality hits in, and they're back. You just go back to your default patterns, right? Yeah. So, and I kind of realized that. So I saw that, okay, this is not deep enough. This requires more. So that's when I went deeper into self-development. I started working, doing a lot of the trainings from Landmark Forum.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so I did that for a couple of years. I worked, I did all of the basic ones, and then I did also the ILP, which is a year-long program.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Very interesting organization, like a little controversial, is that right, at the time, but very beautiful, right? Like lots of knowledge and very deep.
yeah, the thing about it, which was mainly controversial, is that their sales marketing plan was built on that you kind of brought in people. Everybody that did these trainings were, encouraged to invite their friends and relatives to come and check out the intros, right?
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a controversy, I would say, because that could also be called a bit sectish, and also the trainings were, especially the first training, the forum, is it's also pretty dramatic. It's like it's supposed
intense,
to take.
Right?
It's very intense. It's like sleep deprivation, and like you do. I think it's 2 days, if I remember correctly. It's a weekend training, and it's intense, and it's because it's supposed to take you to a point where you kind of see a little bit of what I saw when I had this spontaneous breakthrough.
Sure.
Like
so basically the idea is that you enter into some sort of altered state of consciousness, and there is so much sort of emotional release and emotional acuity that you can look at yourself in reality slightly different, and then maybe you have an aha moment or some realization. Right?
That's it.
Yes.
They work very much mainly mentally and emotionally, right? So they don't use the body, like it's not completely a holistic method. It's mainly mentally, right? You try to see more clearly by being more honest about yourself and your life, basically. And they have, exercises and techniques for this, right, to help you. So it's a good structure. It's a great for, I still recommend it to people. But the problem with what I found with them in the long run was that, they're constantly trying to change their state, a bit like you do with NLP and everything. It's like you're trying to manipulate yourself. And the problem with that is that it's a bit of a bypass usually to the deeper problems we have, like traumas and things that we haven't resolved in our subconscious. And as long as we don't deal with those, and most of us don't want to deal with those because it feels uncomfortable. Like intuitively we are like, oh, no, thank you. I had that for many years. I'm going to get to that because it's just lately that I actually did finally do my, deeply needed psychological exploration. Sure. So I've really seen the difference when finally doing that. So, but you they don't include that really in their work, but their work is still valuable. So that was that, and then around 2007, I realized that I had a little bit of a midlife crisis. So I was married. I had the whole package deal. I had my house. I had my wife. I had my kid had just arrived. Actually it started when he arrived, not straight away, but within the first year. I started realizing that, my God, it's like, I feel like I'm in prison.
Wow, yeah.
I could hardly breathe. I got like so depressed because it was like, this is now structured. My life was like, it was so foreseeable. I was running my own business. My wife was doing her career within the government. And, it was like, it was just, somehow it just didn't work for me. And it was tricky because it's like, I had practices, but it was not enough. And I was still really trying to live a normal life. And for some reason, this just did not work in me.
Wow.
This
midlife crisis, I think they can be called the Jungian crisis as well, like that's when you are then led towards individuation and like a second phase in life where you embrace yourself a lot more, you go deeper into yourself. I mean, they can be very useful too, although they're quite dramatic when they happen because of course you have your wife, you have your kid. I can imagine these are very life-changing moments for somebody, right?
It was, because the problem was that I started then, during this crisis, at the end, actually in the middle of it, I suddenly got the idea that I was going to do a Reiki training. And this was odd, not just to my wife, but actually to me. Because up to that point, I had been in Zen Buddhism, I had gone to this, but I had never really been to the spiritual realm with all the crystals, all the mediums, all the healings and all that. I had not been in there yet.
Okay,
I was a virgin to that.
Okay.
So the fact was, I didn't even believe in healing.
Well,
So that's kind of interesting though. So my mind didn't quite believe in healing, or my general attitude was I don't believe in healing. And then still I realized I have to go and do a Reiki training. And I did. And my wife is just shaking her head. It's like, yeah, he's having his midlife crisis, he's doing crazy stuff. But the thing is, I did this training, and during the training, I had, again, kind of like awakenings, because I got so, like the depression I was in the middle of, it just evaporated.
wow, okay.
And suddenly I was in a really high state. Not really the Satori or anything like that, but more just energetically. I was suddenly full of life again, and it was just quite remarkable. And it just kind of showed me that, okay, trying to be normal and have a 9-to-5 job puts you, down the drain, and I'm, so depressed I, can hardly, deal with anything. I do something like this, and suddenly I'm like not just back on track, I have lots of energy, I'm like in the moment, spontaneously. Life is like suddenly kind of the opposite from the depression, right? This was like, that was really like a wake-up call again.
Some people never really realize the presence of energy. I mean, everybody feels high energy, low energy, or positive vibes, full power. The language around energy and energy states is very rich just in popular culture.
Yeah.
But very few people really realize that you can harness energy, you can move energy, you can create energy through concentration in aspects, in parts of your body. You can move energy, you can channel energy onto other people. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you have this kind of like full realization, and it's not an intellectual thing, you gotta feel it.
Yeah.
It does change your life a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially when you do feel it properly like that, and you haven't been quite aware of it before.
Yeah.
It is revolutionary, because it is actually, it's one of the things I teach nowadays, because, I mean, this clarity is very important, especially for us Western people, because we're so intellectualized. We're so dependent on our level of kind of oriented by understanding. So clarity from the mind is important.
Sure.
But for quality of life, what we usually lack is the felt sense that we had as children when we were more open and sensitive. And this is like, a part of that is actually when you start opening up, you could call it your heart, because it's felt, in my experience and the initiations and trainings I've been through, it's been very clear that this intelligence is kind of perceived through the chest center somehow.
Okay.
And even, this is interesting, because if you look at science nowadays, neurology especially, they have found out that not only is the heart the major electromagnetic generator in the body, it is the organ that generates the most electromagnetic fields, or field constantly, and it is, but also like from the chest, there's also we have the vagus nerve, which is the major nerve that goes through the chest down to the stomach. And we have all these kind of cells that are neuron-like, so information going up to the brain, processed and ready and delivered as information to the brain, is like 80% of what is the information going down is to regulate.
It's a lot, right?
Yeah, so it means, so the kind of, it's quite already recognized neurologically that there is intelligence in more parts of our body than just our brain.
Sure. Okay, so you had this realization through the Reiki training that indeed there is a lot more to you than just your intellect. There's an energetic aspect that actually makes you feel full and more alive in a way, right?
Exactly.
And so that's the beginning of a journey, I suppose.
Yes, thank you. That's precisely that. Because that's when I realized I need to do more exploration. And I actually just dropped my job. I was lucky enough, fortunate enough to have enough money to be able to take actually, actually also I got divorced there because my wife actually gave up.
Fair enough.
But it was, we just realized this doesn't work. It was not with hostility. It was a very beautiful, in the way a divorce can be beautiful, it was still a beautiful divorce. But that meant we sold the house. So the house we had all the prices have been going up. It had been going up. The house had been like doubling for the 4 years we had it.
Wow.
So that made me quite a good little extra pocket money to go out and explore with. So I did. So from 2007, I actually went on like this quest where I just went to every training I intuitively felt drawn to.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing so many different trainings for those 3 years. I was doing trainings also in different parts of the world.
Okay.
So I was doing trainings in Sweden. I was doing all kinds of training. I was also doing like a Zen coaching training, a whole year of that. I was doing shamanic trainings with a number of shamanic practitioners. I was doing meditative mindfulness exploration of different teachers. I was also involved with some more mystical schools that were like awakening the third eye and going into very deep regressions and extremely powerful techniques.
Very interesting.
Clear Vision Meditation School was the name of that school. The list is very long, so I won't bore everyone with all the details. But towards the end there, towards 2009, I discovered, I kind of realized my sexuality was still very both unexplored in the sense of in a deeper sense, but also that I had really had issues with.
I think lots of people struggle with sexuality because of the taboos, the repressions, because of the general culture that sees sexuality as something dirty that cannot be explored, that is shameful in many ways. And despite us being modern individuals in a modern world, we still have this heritage of thousands of years of religious institutions, and all sorts of problems even these days that kind of limit our ability to even connect with such an important aspect of ourselves, right?
Right, and it's like you say, it's collectively shamed for thousands of years, and in most societies. Sure. So it's a human issue. It's like on the collective human level, as far as I can tell. Which is of course, we have our personal level of that, but then we also have this huge collective thing. So back in 2009, I started exploring Tantra for the first time properly. And I did that first with Sarita, it's one of his older sannyasin, very famous teacher. And I did a few other things with some Swedish practitioners. And then in the summer 2010, I ran into this guy who was just starting up his school then, and who actually was just mind-blowingly powerful trainings. I mean, because he was at the big festival in Sweden called No Mind.
Axbacka.
Exactly.
I've been there, yeah.
You've been there, yeah.
Not the No Mind, but I've been to another festival, yeah.
Right, okay. Yeah, so No Mind is one of the biggest Northern Europe festivals every summer, and there's teachers from all over the world come there. So I met this guy there, and he was introducing his trainings, and I went to the last intro training he had there, or intro workshop, and he was doing some Kundalini stuff, and the whole group was it was like a madhouse, but in a very cool way.
Osho style?
No, it was not even Osho style. Okay. It was worse than Osho. It was more like shamanic powers, and the really awakening the spine, and people were like wiggling around, like all this. I was like, wow, this is, because I could really feel it. The energetic field was extremely present and strong. So when he started doing his trainings in Sweden, well, actually in Europe at all, it was in September 2010 he launched it, the first level 1. And so I joined that, and then I did all his trainings that autumn. Everyone he did in Europe, and there were quite a few. And then I became part of the team.
Oh, okay. So supporting him? Or?
Yeah, working for that school. So I was working for that school from just before Christmas 2010 till September 2015.
Wow, 5 years, that's a lot.
Yeah.
You dedicated a lot of time to this.
Yeah, in total I participated and assisted at 116 retreats.
Wow, that's so much experience.
Yeah, and it was a very, very intense school. It was the name of the school is the New Tantra. It still exists.
Oh, TNT.
TNT. Yeah.
That's also very famous. Yeah.
Yeah, it got quite famous for.
Were people like having weed and mixing with sexuality? Is that right?
Yeah, it was.
It's famous for that, I think.
This was a very extreme school.
Okay.
In many ways.
Okay.
The weed is like actually the kind of the least extreme part of it.
Okay, but you felt good in this environment, yeah? You were connected to these people because of course you were there for so long.
Well, the thing was that my nervous system was actually constantly on red alert around the teacher because he had this. I mean, I realized at the end of it that he had a bit of a personality disorder. And you know, it was a bit antisocial. So because it was very extreme and strict, and a very, very, very ultra masculine presence from, and it was his way or the highway very much. And but he was a very powerful teacher. So because he had been before also he was initiated as an Advaita teacher before, and he had been doing satsangs from the late 90s for quite a number of years until he became a student until he met David Data, another famous teacher, and became an apprentice of David Data first.
Okay.
So this is his story. But anyway, but that's just to give a bit of lineage how this is, you know, a bit crazy, this crazy wisdom school I was in. So I chose to step out of the school when I realized that, well, after all those years, I kind of realized that myself and the students that I was working with tended to, when we were in for a long while, to get a bit burnt out, and that was like, the problem was there was a lot of space for activating things and having things come up, but there was never really any space for integration and like taking care of whatever is triggered, your traumas and whatever.
Okay.
This was not so healthy.
Okay.
So when I realized how really badly unhealthy it was, then I chose to step out.
Yeah. It's good that, I'm sure 5 years is a long time, so you did learn a lot, but by the end of it, I suppose, it was time to get out of it, yeah?
Yeah.
Because it's, I think if some people are drawn towards quite intense, the mainstream might call extreme experiences, some people want to hike up the Everest mountain,
Yeah.
But it's not everybody.
No.
But if you do want to explore about yourself, sometimes going to an organization that is like this one, certainly gonna push all your buttons. And
it did, yeah. But it also left people, because the cool thing about it was that people came off the streets to this train. They had no spiritual, because it was not marketed as spiritual so much. It was marketed as advanced sex.
Ah, okay. Well, at least quite honest in some ways.
Yeah.
There was, the two components were together.
Yeah, the thing was that they came from the sex, but the thing is that the spaces that were even in the first levels were like so expanded, because it's like people were going into satori's. People were having satori's were not the most common, but the most common was
Sure.
And this was so common, with students that came with no prior experience, and they were like in this field with that energy, with all the sexual energy was activated. So that kind of explosive energy was used to like really blast the head clear and open up the system. So people were like really, they came for the sex, but they stayed for the mysteries. And the sex, to be honest.
I suppose, yeah.
So that was that school, and just to wrap up my story. So after that, I actually had to work quite intensely on myself, because I'd been through this experience for 5 years, which had brought up a lot that I had not really had time to deal with. There was no real space for it. So I was doing quite a lot of healing work. I started doing a lot of plant medicine work also back then. I had never done that before, never done any psychedelics before that. But that was very helpful for me back then to get clarity and healing on many levels. Ayahuasca did about 40 ceremonies.
Wow, okay.
So that was very helpful. But I also did psychological work, or had therapists, and this was like when it started really settling for me.
Okay.
When I finally realized that all these decades I've been trying to get back to this state, but I have not been willing, basically, subconsciously, I've just not been willing to take a look at the deepest, most subconscious parts of myself, and not even bothered too much to look at the parts that are actually running the everyday show either. It's like always trying to find another way to kind of get around that, dealing with that. So as soon as I started working with therapists to understand my psyche better, to get to know myself as a personality, as the personalities actually, because that's what I realized we were. It's not one personality we have many, many sub-personalities, and they have very different perspectives. And getting to know them is a bit like getting to know the people around you in your neighborhood.
Fascinating, right?
Yeah, so if you know everybody well, and you're all willing to make sure that everybody gets seen and heard fairly, then you always have a much more peaceful environment, right? The same inside, but we usually don't do that. That's why we have conflicts in our psyche.
Sure. Like parts work, integration. So these are all very, very good modalities. And I also believe very much that the best way to really learn about yourself is to do both the sort of spiritual soul exploration as well as the psychological, because the two together are really powerful, I think. And also being able to go in the body and feel the body too, like mind, body, spirit, that's the holistic way, right?
Totally. I totally agree with that. And actually it's like there's like in the teachings that kind of I share, there's actually one of the core teachings is that you can see the body or the systems as like many different mappings, but if you look at it strategically, what really is happening in us, we have three major contractions. We have one in our head, which is keeping us locked into this idea about ourselves, and all this monkey mind business that's going on, blah, 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 the uncontrolled thinking. So this is a contraction in our head. When that's released, we actually have these kind of satoris and this like clarity. We have one in our chest, which is like you could say is the protection for the heart, for the felt sense. Because we're born into a fucking crazy world. People are actually, this is not a very healthy world, the humanity. Because people are like, this so seldom we have people that we are born into families where they are truly healthy on all levels and can give the nurturing that we truly need.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, it's very difficult because we're all in this individualized experience of a separate self. So
that's the heart, yeah.
Yeah, and the third one is in our root, or actually hara kind of area, and that is what also the sexual energy is. That is the one which is the power.
Sure.
So that's where like life force, the power sits. So to be truly embodied, you actually need all three.
So nice.
And this you can see with different teachers, that they don't always have all three. If you take someone like Eckhart Tolle, for example, who had his realization not through any practice, he can't teach any practice really because he didn't do that. He just sat on his bench and had so much emotional pain, he called his pain body, right?
Yeah, sure.
But suddenly he just broke through. Same with Byron Katie, right? They have the same story, these world teachers. But they didn't do any practice, and they never discovered all the three centers because they just popped here.
The way I see Eckhart Tolle is got a limp body. Almost the body aspect doesn't exist.
Exactly.
Almost. It's just a very sharp intellect and a big soul.
And he also has some openness of the heart.
Sure.
But it's not like the Christ energy is coming out, like the full.
No, it's not very passionate. It's more. But I still love Eckhart Tolle. But I know what you mean. I mean, it's not fully, it's not embodied at all.
I'm only mentioning because most people know who he is, right? So just to give an example,
Sure.
And then if you have the ideal, I trying to see if I have any really world famous teacher for the heart center. Yeah, like Amma, the hugging Amma. Like she doesn't say much. She just hugs people, right? She's more just the heart center is open, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then people that do have their lower center mainly open, they are and don't have these centers open, they are usually dangerous people.
Wow.
Because if
Psychopath.
yeah, it tends to be like they can have a clarity, but if you don't have your heart open, for example, if you don't have the felt sense open, if you don't have access to that, because the energy is very corrupting. The power is just power. It doesn't have a,
compassion.
It doesn't have it doesn't have any disposition towards being good or bad. It's like nuclear power, right? You can use it for creating electricity or heating, or you can create bombs, which is like...
It's a neutral tool that then needs to be led by some sort of higher consciousness.
Exactly.
That is developed from the heart and the intellect,
exactly.
I suppose.
Well,
so I mean, it's fascinating, your journey and your personal exploration, and also the exploration of different sort of spiritual and psychological groups is really quite remarkable, I have to say. And now you're at the stage where, of course, you are holding space yourself, right?
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more about your teaching, how you were able to sort of synthesize and analyze all these different kind of information and tools and then create your own?
Right. So, yeah, basically what's happened lately is that since I left this other school back in 2015, which is now, what, eight years ago, I've had this long period of integration. And then I've been exploring, how do I go out now and help? How do I contribute? But that hasn't felt like complete. It hasn't felt natural, so it just hasn't happened. The only thing I've been doing, but what I have been doing is I've been coaching and mentoring, like individuals.
Okay.
So people that really are ready to, have like the mirroring back, to keep clarity, I have a few business people, but like they have tons of money, but they're new to the spiritual world.
Yeah.
And they need guidance.
Sure.
But they're clear, they can follow steps, so this is like very interesting way to work, but very limited contribution. So what happened this last year is that first of all, I met, about a year ago now, Prem Vishrant, which is a teacher in heart and basically...
I've heard of him as well.
Yeah, he's pretty awake. Vishrant.org for those who want to check him out. And I really enjoyed his way of teaching.
Okay.
Because he's such an interesting character, because he's very clear, and he has the heart.
Nice.
So even when he kind of tells people off, because he does that too, I like that, he's very straightforward, there's no aggression there, because you can feel that.
It's
the heart is totally open.
Position of love, yeah.
There's actually no person there much at all, right? Because he's gone since 25 years, so it's like, he's pretty clear. But anyway, he's made a big difference for me. And then I also last summer met my current partner. And for the first time in my life, I'm experiencing a new level of intimate relating.
Wow, okay.
Which is like, and I think it's a lot to do with also, of course, the whole background, but also with, to be honest, with just having this new teacher in my life.
Okay.
And the clarity of that. So this is all brought together now, that the inspiration came from that, especially from my intimate relationship now with my partner, because it's been so beautiful, because we actually have a very big challenge, because she has 2 kids, and she's divorced, and she lives in Sweden.
Okay.
So she's not she can't just take off and go to Copenhagen and live with me all the time. She can just come and visit. So we have to have this a long distance relationship. But that's where I found it so amazing, that you could have such a deepening of your relating by just communicating, even just online. So this, to me, just brought in so much inspiration to okay, let's now start sharing this in a kind of what we call a tantric context. So that's how we came up with this, I call it tantric reality, because I wanted to call it first reality practices, like how do you get more in touch with reality as such. And what do I mean by that? Well, basically I mean, most of the time we're if we compare ourselves when we were 4 or 5, we were more spontaneous, we were more here in the sense of that we noticed more things. Now we're so as adults, we're so usually, we're so fully in our conditioning.
Conditioning, yeah, that's a good word.
So we can't really, first of all, we're much more numb. We don't feel as much as we did as kids. So that in itself is like we're missing out on all this part of reality that we can't feel anymore.
Sure.
Right? And we can't, and because we have such strong opinions and opinionated minds that are like seeking certain things and really want to avoid other things, we can't even see clearly. We think we see reality, but we actually see this with a filtering of all of this conditioning too.
I totally agree. Like when people have opinions, mostly they parrot the headlines of either social media or the newspapers. It's very rare to find somebody that actually integrates a view of the world that is a little bit more nuanced and sophisticated. Everybody's like sort of repeating the big propaganda signs, could be left wing, right wing, whatever.
Right.
And also the way they see themselves is quite cliche in a way. You're just almost going through the motions in automatic. You have your job, you have your things, and very few people have the courage to stop and question. And then when you stop and question, you open a Pandora's box, and you go through like a dark night of the soul sooner or later, because you realize that a lot of this stuff is highly manufactured, highly fake, doesn't really serve you. No. Maybe serves some people, but not you very much, But then, moving away from that is very challenging because your family doesn't want you to change your opinions.
No, exactly.
You don't. Lots of your friends don't want you to change your lifestyle. It's really tough. It's really tough. And it's most people don't want to do it.
No, and most people don't, and that's totally fine. So, because life is that's something that's what's given me the deepest relaxation. It's when seeing life more clearly, seeing reality more clearly. One thing we notice is that first of all, that we're not that important. And this first can seem like confronting, but when you feel into it a bit more, it's like, oh my God, what a relief. I'm really not that important. So that means also you still have responsibilities, right? But it's like the most of the stuff we do, it takes so much effort. It's either we're so concerned about what everybody else thinks of us, or we have our own internal dialogue, which is usually the worst part with the inner critic and so on, but it's pushing us to achieve, to somehow counter this lack of self-worth or whatever we have as our, underlying traumatic neurotic reality.
I think you started the interview talking about the fact that at some point in life you became nihilistic in a way. You realized that life has no meaning, right?
That's what I saw back in already.
Yes, and that's what I think as a basic construct, life indeed seems to be meaningless, but then we need to dress it up with some stories, some meaning, something to do, right? Yes. It's very important. But then very often the stories that we take on to be true and to be ours are given to us. It's not we go and search for them. There is some sort of script that is handed down, okay, like two children, middle class lifestyle, corporate job, and getting out of it, and good, bad is all kind of decided centrally and passed on to us, and moving away from it is hard.
It's worse than that, because actually when you get to look at yourself really closely, what we perceive as this me, myself, and I is only those programs. It's just that. There's no actual, if you just check in this moment, try to locate this sense of yourself, this idea of yourself, somewhere in yourself. Where is it?
Ego is made by society. Is that right? So ego is a reflection of society.
It's like you say, it's inherited. It's inherited by the structure of how society works, how human species works, right? So, and actually it's but it's not all a bad thing. This is something that needs nuances, right? Because much of this program it's actually biological to a sense also, because a lot of it is about survival.
So that's the ultimate. We have a natural meaning, which is the one of survival and procreation. And that's such a powerful meaning, and it's embedded into the physiology of our body.
It's genetically programmed, it's biologically programmed.
Yeah,
right? So
it's nature itself. Nature itself.
It's nature itself.
Yeah,
exactly. So this is a part of having a body, being in this vessel as a being. That belongs to the body. But when we experience beyond that, which is also something that is the kind of goal of what I teach, because just teaching and showing, having lectures or so, it can be interesting for the mind and somewhat expanding to have new perspectives. But I find that the only thing that really is interesting for people is to have direct experiences of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is what I call, or what is classically called, initiations.
Okay.
You can also just call it immersions into the present moment.
Okay.
So, but it's not just the present moment, it can be on different topics, right? So if you're talking about like, okay, now we're going to have like, just to see this, just to start looking at your own psyche, instead of having a lecture about it, what we do is we explain some theory about it, so you have some point of reference when you go into the exercise. But then with the exercise, you actually start looking and get guided to start discovering that, oh yeah, right, that's actually how it works. So that you get the keys, right? So that you can actually, and tools, so that you can actually continue this process in your everyday life. That's practice, right?
It's the difference between having some information given to you and then having the realization of the information. When you're embodying it, you're really feeling it. Because many people know many things, but they don't do them, don't embody them, don't live them.
No.
So there's this kind of like dichotomy, this like a split almost, right? So how can you actually get people to realize this information about themselves and the world?
Right. This is actually
that's the challenge.
That is, first of all, that's correct. It's the big challenge, and that is actually why I also sense that why I have not started teaching until now, because I'm actually launching this whole school here on this island in February now, with my partner when she comes, and with a team of assistants that are also very world class. So why is basically because before it was partially embodied, but something in me felt that it wasn't embodied enough. But now things have just, it's like, I don't know, it's like when we work really hard and we go through life, there are periods when things are really challenging, and then there are periods where we seem to get help, like we get grace or something.
Sure.
It's like we just get a partner or something from life. It just gives us a break, right? Like, and it can be very unexpected. And this is what I felt happened with this last year for me. And then things have just become so much clearer. And when things become clearer and they are lived, that's what we've been doing. That's how I've experienced relating to this partner of mine now, this 6 months. We do so much practice in our relating, and it's so natural. And we're like, things are coming up, getting triggered, of course, and then processes are in place and really now working for like really embracing everything that comes up and becoming much more, because when you embrace it, you naturally become more unconditional. Because if you can accept something, you don't have to put in a condition anymore. You don't have to put up rules the same way to protect yourself. So it's like all is falling into place in a very beautiful way. And this is when you get something we call transmission. When you embody something, anything, it could be like you're a master of any sport or an instrument or something. Whatever you're really good at, if you really master it, you actually have a transmission of that because you're natural with that, whatever it is, whatever skill it is.
It is a form of grace that you receive almost, right?
Well,
I mean, there is a technique you have to practice towards it, but between being an awkward downhill skier and being a very embodied, really not good, skier, that's this gap. It's almost magical in a way. It's like some sort of embodiment or transmission that you get. Because I remember as a skier as well. At the beginning, I was a little bit awkward about it. You're a little scared. You're gonna fall off, etc. Towards the end of my skiing sort of career, if you want, I could just go 80 kilometers an hour downhill, with any kind of snow, mastering myself and the energy of skiing to such a great, passionate extent. Everything came naturally. Came through me almost,
Right, then
my mind was not even there.
That's the point. That's a very good point, Luca, because that's what I mean by mastery, right? When you truly master any skill like that, you do not have to think about what you do. Actually, anybody can relate to this who's learned how to drive, or we all walk. So, and most of us we know how to ride a bicycle, right? We learned that as kids. Before we learned it, it was a struggle. We were falling off. It was we had to focus, we had to concentrate, we had to get help or advice or whatever. But as soon as we find a balance, soon as we master the skill, we don't have to think about it anymore, right?
Sure.
And this is what you're talking about with the skiing.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a level of where we effort. This is what you usually call evolution. We put in the practice. We do the work. We have our passion there for whatever we're striving for, right? And we work and we work and we work and we work, and life beats us, and we go through all these challenges and struggles, and we somewhat progress.
Yeah.
But then there's a point where we start getting what you call also like what is traditionally in mystical schools called involution.
Oh, okay.
That's when they actually, because we're actually one reality, right? This is actually one, ultimately there seems to be only one being here. There's only one consciousness. And it seems to be, as far as I can tell, in some longing to wake up to itself, to kind of feel itself, realize itself.
Okay.
At least in the human form.
Yeah.
So this is involution. It's the impulse, the will, the divine, whatever you want to call it, the greater coming in to form. As the form is evolving up towards higher states. So this is also something that, with that understanding, when you help people to progress, you can include this, and this is what I do. Include like which practices are the ones you need for you? How do you then open up for more potential of actually taking in grace, having grace happen? You can't force grace, but grace is a lot about allowing. You have to be more allowing. You have to practice allowing, and opening of the heart helps also, not necessarily.
They say grace is given, not obtained. So you can do some work to open yourself to grace, to go towards it, but then the last bit is not even the technique. It's just literally you have to give up of everything, because that's when your ego and the dualism kind of melts, and you have this mystical experience or this feeling of union.
Or you just give like completely in the moment, free from all concerns and total mastery of skiing. Right?
So nice.
Yeah, which is blissful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that's a bit about that. I mean, I can say lots of things. This training we're launching here now, we call it the foundation training. It's a basic entry-level training. It's a 5-day training. It's about 40 hours, so it's quite a lot. Yeah. It's an intense training. We start 10 in the morning, we end 10 in the evening, and we have 2-hour lunch and 2-hour dinner, so it's 8 hours a day. But anyway, it's actually not a sexual, it's not a tantra in the form of neo-tantra sexual workshop in that sense, because it's more about what we're talking about now. How do you resensitize yourself? How do you open up? Which practices? What can I do? If to basically feel more alive, right? And how do I progress with that? And that's what we show. So we show like how do you work with your mind, mindfulness basically. Which is like clarifying, opening your mind, or awakening your mind, whatever you want to call it. Then we work with the chest center, and we look at, okay, so now when you start being a little bit more clear and you can calm your mind down so that you're at least somewhat here in the moment, what more senses do you have?
Okay, so when is this training coming up? In February, what day?
So the dates for the training here is the 9th till the 13th.
Okay.
So it's a couple of weeks away. And before the training, we're actually going to have 2 intro workshops for free that are 3 hours each. And that's because I want people to actually come and check it out, get to meet us, to get a feel, is this for me, is this a good fit, before they sign up. So there's going to be one at the Impro House in Chitanu, close to Itko there, behind there on the street. And that's going to be on Saturday the 3rd, and that's 7 o'clock till 10 o'clock. And then there's going to be one 3 days later, the 6th, so that's on Tuesday, I think. And that's in the afternoon at the Jade Temple. 3 to 6.
Very nice. So these are free if you're interested and want to learn a little bit more, and I get a feel for the team as well, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good to attend. And that leads me naturally into my final question, which is like a question I ask everybody. I mean, you seem a very international gentleman. You've traveled all over the world, you've been around. Why do you love Kopangan so much that you're actually doing your training here?
That's actually a very beautiful question. So first time I came here was in January 2011. So that's actually 13 years ago now. And I kind of came, I don't know if I was here for another training then, and I was only here for 2 weeks, if I remember correctly. But something got me to come back already the year after that. And then I've been coming every winter and usually staying for a full tourist visa, like 3 months is the standard I've been staying, until 2019, from where I've actually now living here.
COVID helped you, or even before COVID you started wanting to live here?
I actually came in the autumn there and I kind of got stuck. This is a very sticky island. And what I love about Kopangan is that it's so versatile for me. It's like it's got both the spiritual community. First of all, it's got the climate, but that's not just here. But it's a good climate, and it's got the beautiful beaches. It's just the whole tropical thing of it. It's something I love. Then Thailand, I like. If I compare it to like India or like Bali, Bali is now also beautiful, but.
Softer Thailand, no?
Yeah, Thailand is also more modern than India, especially.
For
so
sure.
you have everything here. You can, it's civilized, and also I'm actually really into the music scene. I really love electronic music or like deep tech house and that style of music. Which there's a lot of very good DJs here. So for me, it has like both that. It's a little bit of Asia's Ibiza.
Yeah.
So it's a cool island. And it has also, the awareness with the spiritual community here. So kind of countering that, like to balance that. And it's set in beautiful beaches in a, civilized country. It's like, what's not to like for me? It's like, of course, it's like.
It's so easy to fall in love with the island, for sure,
Yeah.
And of course, if you now want to, you started your own school now and you want to develop it, it's also a great place for that.
Yeah, because Kopangan, especially as I see the spiritual community, it's a little bit like a sandbox. You can come here and experiment. It's like it's a kind of, perfect place for that. So what we're doing here actually with our training is that we're actually putting it at a kind of island price, as it is like to fit that.
Good. Yeah.
So we're actually selling it at like 65% off, so it's only 10,000 baht instead of what it would be.
Wow.
10,000 baht for 40-hour training is extremely
That's
cheap.
very good value, yeah.
Yeah. So,
but then you could replicate in Sweden
we are already
and make them
booking
charge them like full price.
Yes, we will be doing that this summer now.
Okay. That's
We're already booking retreat centers, and we will be doing a number of trainings in Sweden this summer.
So that's why even more, if you have the chance to come to Kopangan for the training, like it's cheaper here. So that's yet again, another benefits of being here. Okay, so do you see yourself like staying in Kopangan for the long run, or what is? I don't know if you have any plans or any hope or directions for the next few years.
Yeah, it's like I've been looking at where else would I go, because my own country, Sweden, where I'm from, it's like it's beautiful in the summer. Not always good weather, but still beautiful. The nature is beautiful in the summer. But the winter is too long, too cold, and too dark.
Yeah.
It's just too depressing.
Northern Europe is quite depressing in winter.
and my son is grown up now. He doesn't need me directly like that. So I have no reason to be in Sweden. And I can't find, when I look at the rest of the world, I'm like, where else would I go? I've actually done this. I really looked like, where else would I go? Especially when the development started here, I was like, okay, is there some else? Backup plan? If it starts being like Ubud in Bali.
Too posh.
Yes, too much traffic, like there and stuff like that. That would not be good. But I don't think it will. It doesn't seem to be heading quite that extremely that way. And I also now have land here since a few years back.
Ah, nice.
So my plan is to actually have my own little, from the beginning I wanted to have my own center, just to be able to contribute with a space like that for people that wanted to come and teach, and also for my own teaching.
It's nice.
But then I realized that that's a lot of work.
Yes, yes.
And you
yes.
have to choose your battles, right? So if I'm going to now dedicate more of my time to like facilitating trainings, I don't want to burden myself. I'm now like I consider myself semi-retired because I
Nice.
really appreciate not having stress in my life.
And to be honest with you, because of the relatively low cost of living in Thailand,
Yeah.
it's possible to work part-time or work on projects, you know,
Yeah.
and you don't need such a big income here, right?
That's true.
That makes it a lot easier as well. But you know what you're saying is really fascinating. I really enjoyed. You know, I also enjoy interviewing. People that have maybe a longer sort of journey into spirituality. You certainly do have that. So I enjoy chatting to you, and I wish you all the best for your event coming up. And welcome. Thank you for coming to Chalaklam. And
yeah, thank you, Luca,
Cup on
for
cup.
having me. I also want to say I really enjoyed this interview. It's really, you're doing a great job at interviewing.
Okay.
You're very positive and open and really opening space. So it's really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.